Hey everyone, welcome to the first part of my How to Shmup series. And today we are playing Imperishable Night, the Toho game. I have a whole video talking about why I selected this game, so check that out if you're wanting to know about why I selected this game. So I'll just start off by saying, how do you get your hands on Imperishable Night, right? Because, hold on one second. Put this on so there's two different ways to do it basically. One is to order it on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description. 25 bucks on Amazon, worth the money. 2-day shipping, all that good stuff. If you don't want to order it on Amazon, another route that you might consider is downloading the demo from Zun's site. You can still do that. Or if you're feeling like a naughty boy, you can get it off the shrine. The thing is that if you get it off the shrine, it does have it's all patched and ready to go. So, ironically, even if you do buy the game, you might want to just double check that the version you buy has all the patches and everything on it. If not, you'll want to get those patches and put them on. So, yeah, that's basically how you do it. Either of those routes, whatever you want to do, up to you. So, actually we'll leave it in the music room for a second, because I want to talk about some of the, want to prepare yourself before we get right into it. So the thing, we're taking it from the beginning here. This is step one. I want to start by just kind of talking about some things that I think will be helpful right away. And the first concept that I want to explain, that I haven't seen many people explain before, is that when it comes with shmups, even though they are 2D games, you still have to think in 3 different dimensions. The second you start thinking in 3 dimensions rather than 2, you are going to start to understand how this genre works a little better. So what are the 3 dimensions? So there's the horizontal space and the vertical space, so those 2 dimensions. The third is time. You need to start thinking in terms of time, because unlike other genres, shmups are auto-scrollers, so they create a dynamic of time that other games do not. In other games, or most other games, if you want to stop, all you have to do is let go of your controller, and the game pauses itself, basically. If you don't want to fight the next enemy around the corner, if you don't want to engage in the next fight, you can simply stop playing, and the game will wait for you and say, okay, whenever you're ready to go, Mark, I'll be here. Not all games are like that, but that is kind of a universality of most games. Sometimes, like Mario Bros, they'll put in a timer to kind of motivate you. But even still, that is much more lenient than how shmups work. Shmups will continue to play whether you hold on to the controller or not. Time is a factor. The cool thing about their auto-scrolling nature is it is extremely reliable. It is on a timer, right? So everything happens in a sequence the exact same way every time, most of the time. Sometimes RNG changes that, but most of the time everything will happen in time in a sequence. So the second you start thinking of shmups in the 3 dimensions of horizontal space, vertical space, and time, the faster you're going to catch on to some of the aspects of these games. So just try and keep that in mind. Try and think about what's coming up and how every moment I'm going to turn down the sound effects. Every moment you engage with the game is a moment spent that probably could be spent better or optimized. So you're trying to optimize every slice of the game you can. So just think of that. So to start with, let's start on easy mode. Even if you're a good player or a semi-good player, whatever, I'm just starting on easy mode to illustrate some concepts here. So one reason why I also chose Toho is because Toho gives you more breathing room than other games. Cave games, classic shmups. Most of them do not give you much breathing room, whereas Touhou does, especially in easy mode. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to start focusing on the efficiency of your inputs. If we get focusing on that right away, we are going to, we're going to be ahead of the game a little bit. So let's talk about your basic inputs. You have up, down, left, right, and then the diagonals. So the reason why I bring this up to begin with is you are going, unlike many other genres, shmups, you are actually going to think about every single input. Every input you do, you should be thinking, why? Why am I doing this? Why am I moving here? Why am I moving there? Every single input you want to think. And then you also want to think of how different inputs influence the game. So I'm going to begin by going over some of the common inputs that I'm sure you all have seen and heard of. So the first one is this. So this is what you do when you are, a young kid at the arcade and you're not sure what to do. You hug the back of the screen like this because going to the back of the screen gives you the most reaction speed, right? I remember when I was first playing Dodonpachi, I was thinking, I bet I should just stay in the back of the screen and just stay back here and try and dodge everything like this, left and right, like Space Invaders style or Galaga style, right? So why is this an issue? Well, it's because when you're playing shmups, especially bullet hell shmups, you need to start thinking of the screen as like a chessboard, where every space on the screen you are trying to control, you're trying to dominate. So I'm going to apply some chess logic here for you. So the optimal screen position, most of the time, in a state where you don't know what's going to happen, you're coming into a stage, you don't know what's ahead of you, is this position right here. About you can see about 2/3 of the way up, or 1/3 of the way up, depending on how you want to look at it. 1/3 of the way up. The reason why it's 1/3 is because this zone up here, in almost every shmup, sort of just belongs to your enemies, because that's where they spawn, that's where they fall down. So going up there is extremely dangerous. Now, there are times, especially in like Touhou games and stuff like that, where you do want to go up this high to speed kill enemies coming in, but this is a dangerous area of the screen. Kind of the top third, that belongs to your enemies most of the time, and sometimes the enemies literally take up the whole space up here. So then the reason why you don't want to be right here in the middle, typically, and again, this all depends on what's coming and what you're planning, but I'm saying just in generality here. The middle of the screen is not quite the best optimal position because it's a little bit too close to their spawning zone, and you have very little reaction time of what they're going to throw at you. Like if you play up here, this is playing aggressive. Now, in some shmups, Ketsui is a great example of this, you will have to play aggressive at certain points. The game will force you up into this area to survive. So keep that in mind. So I'm just trying to outline the different play styles, right? So playing up in this area, that's playing aggressively. The risk is you have less reaction. The reward is that you will kill your enemies faster, and you will control more of the screen because you're cutting them off. Remember, try and think of this like a chessboard. So up here, this area is like the starting row of the black pieces. They just kind of own it. There's not really much you can do unless you have a certain advantage coming into it, or the patterns or whatever. Up here is where you're playing aggressively. This is where you can really control a lot of what's going on. So Ketsui, especially let's think of stage 4 in Ketsui, right? Where it has those planes come in and they just vomit bullets all over the screen, and you're hanging back here like, oh shit, and you're just walled into the back of the screen and can't get out. The reason why is because you have given up that screen control to them. So in some sections of the game, in sections of games, you want to stay up here to control the screen, or like in this area to like control the enemy, suppressive fire. If you're not sure what's coming, this is kind of the optimal neutral position of, okay, I don't know what's coming, I have enough time to react to it, most likely. I'm getting a good coverage of the screen, but I'm not completely forfeiting by coming back here. So, some techniques for dodging patterns that are going to be useful is always thinking about your screen position and your inputs. And I'll kind of get more into how they interact with each other. But the step one is to think about your screen position. And so, let's proceed to this boss fight here. So this is on easy mode. So, the lessons here. So looking at this pattern, yeah, it's an easy pattern. So let's give him a little bit of time here to throw something at me. So in patterns like these, you'll see these lines right here. The first thing you want to do when you're assessing an enemy or a boss is you want to start classifying what types of attacks they are using. Again, this is why Toho is really useful, because Toho is very clear what attacks they are using. You want to start analyzing and categorizing the enemies. And that's a foundational skill, I think, that most people learn sort of inherently just by repetition, but if you start focusing on it right away, you're going to learn the genre much faster. So let's start with the two fundamental types of attacks: fixed attacks and tracking attacks. So fixed attacks are attacks like these bullets here, where they will always fly the same. You see those, those pear-shaped bullets or whatever they are? Those will always fly the same trajectory. They do not acknowledge your position. They don't care where you are. They don't care what you're doing. They are just going to do their thing. They're going to they're going to spawn out of the enemy a certain direction every single time. You can count on it. You can go to sleep and wake up in the morning and it will be the same. So those are fixed attacks. See these yellow lines coming down? Those are what's called aimed attacks. So that's where the enemy AI looks where you are and says, okay, I'm going to fire at you. And where you are will influence the attack. What's interesting is that some patterns are very subtle about their influence, where it doesn't seem like you're having much of an influence, but if you watch carefully, you'll notice you are somewhat influencing the movement of their patterns. And then other patterns, like aimed attacks like this, are just directly influenced by where you are on screen. So, these are some lessons that we've learned, right? So we've got screen position, we have aimed attacks versus fixed attacks. Now let's start incorporating the element of time into this equation, and this will help you greatly. So remember when I said that if you start thinking in terms of time, you're going to deal with this genre, especially bullet hells, a lot more easily. So let's see if we can get him to do an aimed attack. That's a fixed attack. This is fixed. But these blue balls, I think, are aimed. I think they're... It's hard to tell if they're aimed or not. I think they're aimed. Yes, they're aimed, look. So I want to show you something. So hopefully he'll repeat this blue attack again. I want to show you a technique called tap dodging. And I'm sure you guys have heard of this before, or you might have heard about it before. What is tap dodging? What makes it different than regular moving around the screen? So the reason why tap dodging is good is because it is accounting for the third element of time. So remember, so tap dodging, you're moving horizontally or vertically, it doesn't matter. Sometimes diagonally. So you're influencing the space with your dodge. But when you first begin playing shmups, you probably are not thinking in terms of time, and so you're going to just fly away from everything like this. You're just flying away. I'm flying away. I just want to find the safest spot I can. I'm flying away. And that's how you think about the patterns. The thing is, I'm in easy mode, so there's not really a lot of consequences to doing this, right? Because there's so much open space. However, when you start getting into more challenging areas, what will happen is that if you're not accounting for time, you are going to get walled and you are going to die, especially in cave games, because the way a lot of patterns work is that they're on a timer. And so if you're not, if you're just dodging and giving up screen space, immediately you're going to put yourself in a corner. So the thing about screen control and time, I'm trying to put this all together in a way that makes sense and that is clear, is that you have to think of it like a resource. So for instance, I'm sure you all have heard of this. It's called like C-shaped dodges. The reason why these are typically very effective is because they misdirect the pattern at you, and then they create an opening for you to cross. However, in certain patterns, if you do this, the pattern will be faster than you, and you'll get trapped right in the corner, like that. That is why tap dodging is useful. Because tap dodging, you're basically conserving that screen space. You're conserving... Because if you just straight up fly as fast as you can across like this, during certain patterns, this one's really easy, so it doesn't quite demonstrate it as well. I'll show as we get further into these lessons. If you just fly across the screen immediately, you'll find that you're sometimes trapped because you've given up that space way too quickly. Well, what you want to do is, remember, most attacks are on timers. What you want to do is you want to just give up that space a little bit of time. You're basically standing your ground and saying, no, this is my screen, bitch. I'm keeping it. So that is why tap dodging is good. It's because it misdirects the attacks, but it also conserves space. So that's why you'll see players doing this all the time. It's because they're trying to milk out that little bit of extra time in the attack without giving up too much space. Because they're creating these small little openings, but they're not blowing all their space and cornering themselves to get walled out. So that is why tap dodging is useful. Did I just time them out? Yeah, okay, timed out the first boss. So let's move on to lesson 2, which is how I advise you to move around the screen, and how I think when I'm moving and playing. I actually have a really good analogy for this. So when I'm moving and playing, especially when I'm really concentrating, I like to think of myself in terms of an AI, in terms of I have some experience writing scripts and stuff for video games, for like indie shmups and stuff. So maybe this isn't totally accessible analogy to everyone, but basically, what I think about it is every frame, my brain is analyzing and then reacting every frame. So it's like, you know how when you write a script for an action in a game, it's like every frame usually the game checks it and checks the variable, checks the variable, checks the variable. That's what you're doing in shmups. Is every frame your brain sees the screen and runs a quick check, especially when you start to get into more complicated patterns. And that is actually how you can start to dodge complicated patterns. Is your brain is analyzing the screen and choosing the correct input. That's why you'll see me especially. This might be a little bit more my playstyle than other players as well. Is you'll see me doing these tiny little movements around the screen. It's because every frame my brain is thinking, okay, where do I need to be? Quickly analyzing the screen. Where do I need to be? And then how do I get there? And how do I get there safely? And a good thing to keep in mind is when you're playing shmups is you don't want to make too many hard commitments. You want to make lots and lots of little baby-sized commitments over and over. Like this, rather than... That's why you kind of want to avoid really long movements like this, unless they're necessary. There are times where big old movements like this are necessary, but the neutral state should be small movements, analyzing. Small movement, analyze, small movement, analyze, small movement, analyze, small movement, analyze, small movement. Or sometimes if you need to think, sometimes if I'm like, what do I do? I'll just start tap dodging in a direction that I think is safe. Like, okay, I think I want to get over there. I'm not sure what's going to happen, so I'm just going to slowly tap dodge that direction. And basically I'm shoring up the space without hard committing. Because let's say I start going that direction, and then I realize, oh shit, that's not a good idea. Then you can kind of make your way back. Like this, and you're going, oh, okay. Nope, that's a bad idea. So, again, I'm talking about space controlled. I'm trying to just vomit a lot of my ideas out there. Hopefully this is making some sense. But you always want to think about suppressive fire as well. That's another thing you got to keep in mind. That's why space is important. So in boss fights, suppressive fire is not as important, but it's still important. Because you're basically wanting to damage the boss as much as possible, as fast as possible, usually. Some boss fights, there's weird reasons why you don't do that, but usually in a boss fight, right, I'm wanting to stay on top of my enemy. I'm wanting to hit them so that I am getting through their patterns faster and getting the fight over with faster. So the goal in a boss fight, when it comes to spacing, is usually to be underneath them to attack them. However, good shmup design is going to make that challenging. The idea of a boss is that it's a battle. You are trying to get under them and hit them with your bullets. They are trying to push you out of the way with their patterns. They're trying to push you into a corner, push you to the bottom of the screen and trap you. That's what makes classic shmups different from bullet hells. Is classic shmups, usually the enemies are just trying to nail you with a bullet. They're just trying to hit you. Where in bullet hells, the enemies aren't necessarily trying to directly hit you that often. They're more trying to force you into a corner or force you into a position where you're trapped. So that's why I enjoy Danmaku games so much, because it's a game that emphasizes spacing extremely heavily and controlling the screen very heavily. So I'm just going to fly around. I'm not going to shoot. Let's just analyze this screen. So this screen, we've got the bullet. I'm pointing at the screen. You can't see what I'm pointing at. We got those big aim bullets coming down. They're aimed at me. And then you can see here, you've got these smaller bullets, and they're creating an aisle, right? And so what I want to do is I want to stay in the aisle, but while I'm in the aisle, I want to manipulate these large bullets. That's usually the dynamic of Danmaku games, is the fixed bullets put you into a space. They force you in. They're like gates and walls. They put you in a space, and they say, this is where you have to be, because we're the fixed bullets and we make the rules. So you have to get where they want you to go, and then the bosses or enemies, however it's designed, add in fixed elements usually, or maybe some other, or not fixed elements, some aimed elements that you have to try and manipulate within the space you're given. So this is a perfect example of that. I am stuck in this aisle, you see, and I'm going to want to manipulate these aimed bullets to do what I want them to do, to basically get out of my way so I can stay safe in the aisle. So how do you manipulate fixed bullets effectively? Here is a trick that really helped me in Dodonpachi. When it comes to aimed bullets, this is like some geometry shit right here. Usually the higher up on the screen, the more extreme you can make their angles. The more extreme you can make their shots, right? Because look, if I'm up here, I can get this bullet to go at a very extreme angle, see? The lower you are on the screen, the more non-extreme. I don't know how to say it. Sorry, my math skills are not good. But, the more mild the angles. And the thing is that you want extreme angles, because the more the extreme the angle, the faster they're getting off the screen. You want those bullets out of your way, off the screen. But if you're at the back of the screen, see how much more time it lingers on the screen? And how much more space it's occupying? That's the game you want to play, is you want to get bullets off the screen, you want to get the enemy bullets off the screen, and your bullets onto the screen. So good shmup design will play with this mechanic though, right? So see, I'm moving forward because I want to manipulate these bullets. I do also need to talk about the walls, right? So moving up here, I'm not firing because I'm just trying to show you the patterns. And I'm manipulating the bullet. I think these are manipulated. These are somewhat aimed, I'm pretty sure. I was getting caught up in my talk there, but yeah, I'm pretty sure they're somewhat aimed. So there's an example of what to do there. Oh, this is another perfect example. So let's talk about when you're cloistered in by bullets. This is a skill that is a little more advanced, but that's why I like to recommend Toho games, because Toho games test this skill much quicker than most other shmups. So I call it being cloistered, or being in a mosh pit. Basically, when you get in situations where you have this pocket of safe space, and then you have all these bullets swirling around you and kind of going in these different directions, and when you're first playing the genre, it seems absolutely insane that people dodge this shit. That you're like, how are they managing this? Like the cat's eye in Danmaku Unlimited 3, that's a perfect example of this. Where you're cloistered in, this is like a more mild one, but you're cloistered in by all these bullets, see, and they're just swirling around you and moving all these weird directions. You're like, how do I keep track of all this stuff? So I'm going to teach you what I do. Maybe super players have an even better method, but this is the method I do. Is you want to establish on screen, too bad I don't have like a little mouse pointer or something. You want to establish on screen your safe zone, and then within that safe zone you're going to start watching the perimeter, and the second a bullet crosses that safe zone, you're going to watch that one and you're going to respond to it, and then you're going to try to respond extremely quickly to it, and usually with just a slight movement, and then you're going to reestablish the safe zone and then watch for the next. And what's going to happen is it's going to start overlapping, and then that's when it gets really fun and scary. Okay, so right here, it's a little blurry, but you can kind of see through the blur. You got these two, you can see the safe zone, the circle around me. I got two bullets coming into the safe zone. So I have a choice. You can see the pockets there. I'm going to move to the left into that pocket, because I feel like the pattern is moving that direction, and it'll be safer than moving into the corner. And then I'm going to reestablish the safe zone. So here we go. Move to left, reestablish. I'm perfectly safe right now. I'm going to find a tough spot. Okay. So here we go. Now we got these blue bullets coming in, and I've got the walls to the left and right. So what I'm wanting to do is, these blue bullets are much more of a threat than the walls, right? The walls are just going to do their thing. They're fixed. So what I'm wanting to do is I'm going to remove over to the right now, closer to the wall, but out of the way of the blue bullet, and then reestablish my position. So the blue bullets melted or something. Okay, so we're safe here. We're going to stay here. And this is where experience and practice comes into effect, because the act of reading the patterns is a skill that you just have to develop through practice and repetition. It's not necessarily something I can directly explain, but what I can do is teach you the technique for reading the patterns, right? So let's say I get myself in a really shitty position. Oh, come on, I'm trying to get myself in a really shitty position. Like, let's say I put myself in a really shitty position, like right here. It's easy mode, so nothing's really that bad. Okay, here we go. There's a shitty position. So the first thing you always want to do mentally is, if you ever put yourself in a shitty position like this, I did it intentionally, but what you should do is analyze back in your brain, how did I get here? What pushed me into this position? Because usually when you're first starting to play shmups, you're focusing on what hit me, what killed me. But you're going to become a better player if you start to think, remember, back further. It's all on a timeline. Everything's a timeline. So you think back in the timeline, and you think, how did I get in this shitty position to begin with? What got me here? And if you think that way, then you can actually usually avoid further back. It's like a I don't want to say a puzzle, because I hate calling shmup puzzle games, because they're not. But it's like a fighting game where if you reassess what happened to put you where you are, there's usually a safer option in the past that you could have taken. So I'm going to retreat here. Let's see. There's another weird position. So these blue bullets, I'm pretty sure they're just fixed. I think both of these are fixed. I'm not 100%. But if these blue bullets aren't fixed, they're mildly aimed. Yeah, so they're like mildly aimed at me. So the thing about Toho, there's another concept I want to explain, but this really is not a good level to explain it. So let's go to the next level. The next level might explain it a little better. I think it does. Okay, here we go. So I'm sure there's also a concept in shmups called macro dodging versus micro dodging. This is going to be absolutely like an essential skill as well. And what it basically is there's two ways to approach dodging a pattern. You can either dodge within the pattern, which is micro dodging, and usually in bullet hells you're going to do a lot of micro dodging, and then you can dodge outside the pattern by just going around the whole thing, and that's a macro dodge. So usually with bullet hells, this is how the dynamic typically works. Typically a micro dodge is more dangerous but also more rewarding, typically. So let's say I want to be in the middle of the screen right here, right? And there's these bullets come down the middle of the screen. The macro dodge would be to do this, to go around them and to end up in the corner, right? That's a macro dodge. Sometimes that's something you gotta do. There's just times where it's too dangerous to micro dodge. However, you'll notice now I'm kind of walled off. We got the enemies in the middle here. They're controlling the space in the middle. Then we got these dudes spawning in the back firing aimed bullets at me. So I've kind of put myself in a crappy position where if I would have rewinded, so let's, I think you can retry the stage, right? Hopefully that retries the stage. Right, so now we're going to redo this. Oh shit, it goes to stage 1. Maybe I can go into training mode and get stage 3 again. It's not going to let me. I think if I go into medium mode? Okay, we'll play medium mode. Okay, we're going to redo this now. So instead of macro dodging that stage and giving up the real estate, I'm going to micro and hold my ground in the middle. Well, I'm doing a lot of suppressive fire, so I don't have to. And now look at the screen position. Remember, in the last one I was up in the corner, enemies, I was kind of cornered. Here, I'm in the middle, I'm controlling the screen, I'm making the rules. And so that's just good shmup play there, where you're staying in control of the screen, you're suppressing all the enemies, and then you're usually ducking out of the way and then moving back real quick, like this. Watch. Duck it. So moving out of the way, moving back. Out of the way, moving back. Controlling that screen. I'm trying to find another situation to comment on. See how staying in the center is rewarding me? So let's see how this scenario goes if I play back, right? So remember, before I was playing aggressive, I was holding the center. Now let's see what happens when I hang back. See? Look, perfect. It's still not that hard. I can just go up and around. But you can see where I'm getting pushed into the corner more now. And as the game gets more aggressive, that's going to become more and more of an issue. Whereas, okay, now I'm going to play up. So how do you know? Because it sounds like my lesson is just play aggressive all the time, right? Which is a pretty ballsy strategy, but no, that's not what the advice I'm giving you is. What you want to start doing is you want to start assessing each situation and assessing, can I play aggressively here, or is it too dangerous? So right here is a perfect example. It is too dangerous for me to play aggressively now. I need to back off. It's too dangerous, so I'm backing off. Okay, never mind. I was gonna say something, but never mind. And I know I'm playing like shit, by the way, but that's not the point. I've already won all of this game. Or cleared this game, so. I want to show you something. Okay, good. This is like a classic. So what's going on with this pattern here is that the fixed bullets are moving me around the screen. Their job is to keep me moving, to keep me on my toes. And then the aimed bullets are there to kill me. So, how do you beat patterns like this? Especially when they're more aggressive. This is actually a pretty mild pattern. I'm in medium mode now, but it's still pretty mild compared to what you're going to come up against a lot of the time. So how do you beat patterns like this? The trick is, so these aimed bullets are not that hard to dodge, but the trick is, especially when you start to get into patterns that intersect with each other, the trick is you need to learn to basically dodge the fixed pattern reflexively, like with your hands, with your muscle memory. You need to just know, you just need to dodge it at all times. You know what I'm saying? You don't react to it. You don't react to the fixed pattern. You just fly a path through it. And while you're flying that path, you're reacting to the fixed bullets, or to the aimed bullets coming at you. So this kind of pattern, when you're practicing it, the first step one is to learn the fixed pattern. Is to learn what that fixed pattern wants you to do and how to beat it, how to circumvent it. Then, step two is to learn how to safely manipulate the aimed bullets while you're navigating through the fixed pattern. So in Touhou, you can typically play more aggressively during the stages than in cave games. Cave games have a way of pushing your ass back. Okay, let's see if we get anything juicy here. Oh, this pattern. This is a great pattern. So this is another classic Touhou pattern where it's going to force me into an aisle. Like this. So those blue bullets are forcing me into the aisle. And then the next wave of bullets, those red ones, those are the ones I need to react to within the constraints of the aisle. So the first thing you want to do in patterns like this is you want to learn the walls. You want to learn the static part of the pattern and understand its underlying nature, because these patterns have an underlying nature of what they want to do, where they're going to go. Once you learn what the pattern wants to do and kind of analyze that, the second thing you want to start then focusing on is how do you safely manipulate it? How do you safely push the pattern to where you want it to go? And for me, it's kind of in these, I'm pointing, you can't see. It's kind of in the bottom left and bottom right, not the corners, but kind of the area around the corners, those perimeters. That's where the pattern breaks up. See? So you want to just be in this area and manipulate. I think it's completely fixed, to be honest. I'm not sure, but you just want to see where the pattern breaks, where it goes, and watching for the drift. That's another big aspect of bullet hells, is the drift, of how the bullets are drifting and where they're drifting. And usually what happens in really complicated patterns is that certain bullets will drift more than others. That can get you. So with a pattern like this, what I like to do is I like to kind of move back with the pattern for a second, because that helps you kind of get a feel for where it's opening and where it's drifting. So you move back, and then once you understand what it wants, you cut through. So moving back with the pattern, cutting through. Prometheus goes over this in full extent to the jam, and when he did, it kind of blew my mind. I was like, that makes sense. So that's a good strategy. Rather than just cornering yourself and then waiting for the pattern to hit you in the corner, like, here's an example. So rather than hanging out in the corner like this and trying to dodge it within the corner, instead of hanging out around here, that was the perfect pattern to demonstrate this. Let's do it again. Let's. Actually, I don't think I can. I don't think I have it in practice mode yet. But instead of hanging out in the corner like this and just trying to dodge from the corner, what you want to do is you want to start engaging with the pattern and moving with it. And moving kind of, you want to establish a perimeter that it's safe to be this close to it, basically, but not too close, but not too far away either. You want to be in that kind of sweet spot where you're moving with the pattern. And the reason why is, it's like footsies and fighting games. So in fighting games, when you're first starting, your instinct is to just get into the corner and like fight them from the corner, because you feel like you can react better. But once you learn that's a really bad idea. Same thing with shmups is, you want to basically play some like spacing game with the enemy patterns, where you want to keep moving back with them, but as you move with them, you're close enough to when there's an opening, you can just take advantage and get through. Whereas if you're too far away, let's say you're in the corner and the pattern's all the way over here, and you see the opening, but by the time you get there, the opening is gone. So that's why you want to be kind of in this area, and then it's opening, closing, bam, and then you can get through one of the openings. That's why you want to typically move back with the pattern, and then once you get around the pattern, you want to reestablish your space. So you don't want to do this. You don't want to sit here like this. This? You don't want to, this is no. Don't do this. Because you're basically winning an opening and then giving it up and saying, okay. So you're giving yourself a lot more dodging than you need to. Whereas if you take the dodge and then you want to assert yourself into the space. So here's this pattern again. So moving back with the pattern, then reasserting my space, see? Back. Because then you want to do that, because then it gives you that space to repeat moving back with the pattern. So it's like a dance. Of you break the space, you want to reestablish. Moving back with the pattern, moving back with the pattern. Finding the opening, where are you? There's the opening, there's the opening. And then once you have the opening, you need to take it. You need to move forward and reestablish your position. Like this. See? This is much more effective than just hanging out the back of the screen. and trying to dodge from the back of the screen like this. Especially, look at this. You see? You start to get into trouble when you do that. Instead, what you want to do... Okay, no more doing that. Instead, what you want to do is you want to start taking control of the screen. You see, I kind of manipulated where that opening was going to occur. That's another thing you can do is, let's talk about the walls now, right? Because the walls are your enemy and your friend. If you use them, if they're used effectively, they can be a very strong weapon. If they're used badly, they will kill you. So let's talk about the wall. So one really nice thing about walls is that you can kind of grind against them, and usually you can get really refined movement off the wall because you can kind of grind against it, and it just helps. It helps to like with the spacing. It's hard to explain, but you basically can grind against the wall like this, and it eliminates the diagonal input basically. And so you can get more reliable movement on the wall if you grind against it. Same thing with the back of the wall, right? You can get more refined micro dodges by grinding against the back of the wall sometimes. Yeah. So that's a good use of the wall. Another thing about the wall is you can use it to create extreme angles. I kind of talked about that before. That's why people do this. Is because when you get up on the wall, you can make those extreme angles, and then you cut back through. So cutting through, I think this is called like streaming as well. So streaming is when you have an fixed enemy pattern coming at you like this, and you're kind of going do 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 do, and you're tap dodging. And you're manipulating it, and then streaming it is you're getting it to follow you, but you're angling your movement to where the bullets can't quite keep up with your angle, and so they will break and then create an opening. You can get through that opening. That's why moving in a diagonal like this and streaming is really strong, because the bullets basically have difficulty, same thing with on the wall, they have difficulty keeping up with your angle, so they'll start to spread, and then you can get through. Okay, so I think I've established a solid baseline today of some concepts. I know I kind of worked my way through some of them pretty quickly, but I'm hoping as the video went on, me repeating them and showing examples of them kind of gave a base grasp. So I'd also like to thank this video, I'd like to thank my patrons for this video. So Dingo, Double Vision, Dunpeel 2064, Full Set, Retro Shmupper, Gus, Himmel, Kiwi, Jake Ryan, Joe Angelo K, Kino Tosi, Mark Sloan, Maz, Nathaniel Davis, and Electron, Psych, Plasmo, and Young Money Sui. Thanks for watching.